Our world today reminds us that defending a country, an alliance, or a community is not only about armies, doctrines, or hardware. It's also about defending values, social cohesion, and trust. And perhaps no medium speaks better and more directly to our hearts than culture and to our sense of belonging. So music in particular has this very remarkable power to transcend borders, to connect us across differences, and to give meaning and resilience to our shared democratic project. In that sense, culture is not just a matter of entertainment, it's a form of diplomacy, of dialogue, and even of defense. It is a privilege to have with us today Maestro Cristian Măcelaru, one of the most important international conductors of his generation, music director of the National Orchestra of France, artistic director of the International George Enescu Festival, an event that for decades has been a bridge between Romania and the international world of culture. And together we will explore how music and culture can help build narratives that resonate, restore trust, and strengthen the invisible yet essential fabric of our societies. And Maestro, my first question would be, how do you see culture, especially music, acting as a form of soft power, capable of defending values and keeping unity in these challenging times, considering that you are leading some of the most prestigious orchestras of the world, you travel across continents, you work with very diverse people, and you have a very diverse audience?
First of all, thank you for the invitation, and President Joanna already knows that I'm a sucker for the opportunities to talk about the power that music has to unite us. And it's so important to put a little bit in context your question and the idea of the role that culture overall has in the society. Because for me, culture speaks to identity, speaks to personal identity, and a society that finds its strength in our personal identity that connects us both to the past and to each other. It's a society that is able to then unite in ways that nothing else can do. And I speak from the perspective of having been an immigrant my entire life. And many composers, many musicians end up living a life of immigrants because we travel the globe to be able to make music. And that is one aspect in which music actually helps us remain anchored in our own identity. The idea of the immigrant artist traveler that is constantly faced with different cultures, different diverse contexts is actually one that is rather beautiful, because the moment that you have a really strong identity, as let's say Enescu had, as a Romanian born in Romania that took everywhere he went, took the values that he inherited here, but they were presented in a Viennese context at first, then in the Paris context later, and then all over the globe as a mature artist. He maintained that identity, which ended up structuring the way that he connected with people. And I was studying just recently his programs that he presented when he was conducting the New York Philharmonic many years in a row. And on every single program, there was another fellow Romanian composer that he presented, in trying to make people understand that when we take the time to appreciate and really celebrate each other's identity that is defined by culture and by music, we actually discover something that is uniquely different, but at the same time very similar to our own experience. And I think culture and music has always had this role of speaking to the true values of who we are as human beings. Now, of course, there are challenges that we are faced with because it's not a perfect world. But I think when we take the time to look at our own personal identity as it is defined by the culture that we embrace, by the music that we listen to, that we create, then we are able to create a more beautiful tapestry of diverse yet similar human beings.
Thank you so much. defense today is not only about threats, but also about maintaining internal trust and democratic resilience. And related to your experience, how do you see music as a space to foster trust, empathy, to give this sense of belonging that you mentioned a bit earlier, and leverage on these qualities that are essential for any democratic society?
For me, the answer is actually quite simple, and it has to do with education, because nothing teaches a young person more about democracy than having to play in an orchestra. The idea that you are part of a collective that has a leader that could be perceived as a dictator, but actually not, because they don't have any power without the orchestra behind them. But then the way that you listen to each other in an orchestra is exactly what democracy should be. Because the way an orchestra functions has to be in a truly free and democratic way. I listen to every instrument, and what I tell orchestras all the time, it's not how well you perform that makes an orchestra very well. It's how well you help your colleague do their best that defines the quality of the ensemble. Because when you listen very carefully to your colleague and then help them achieve their potential, if everyone in the orchestra does that, the whole ensemble rises to the top. And I think for me, the passion that I have for young people having education in music has to do with a society that understands these values in a way that they're not being taught to them, but they're being absorbed while they are learning something beautiful. And I think these values that can be taught in a setting of having to play together with 100 people in a very, very precise way that you align with each other and you support each other and you listen to each other, this is what democracy should be, isn't it? And I think if we can find a way to use music education as a tool to build democratic values in a society, it would be both beautiful and productive.
Thank you. We are now in the last week of the Enescu Festival. We've had over 4,000 artists in Bucharest and other major cities across Romania, and it's an international brand, and it's a fair representation of Romania abroad. I would ask you, how do you see the role of George Enescu Festival in complementing the work of diplomatic or defense institutions to build bridges between nations, cultures, in spaces where maybe sometimes politics fails?
I was actually very lucky to finalize my studies at the Aspen Music Festival in Colorado, and I spent many, many summers there. So I was very close to the idea of the Aspen Institute as joining forces with music as something that can promote unity and promote ideas that are forward-thinking, addressing issues that we have today, but also addressing the part of our lives and our society, which is our soul and our connection in a way that at the root of what human beings are does. So it's very beautiful for me to see that the Enescu Festival now addresses an area of cultural diplomacy that is very, very important in today's world. I don't think that there is a mistake that the division we are seeing in the world today is a result of the fact that in the past 50 years, governments have continually cut down on their investment in culture. I think there's a great relationship between what we're seeing today and the mistakes that were done in the past 50 years. And I think what we need to do today is to double down on investing in culture as a catalyst against more division in the future. I don't think it will just get better on its own. And investing in culture is a very difficult thing because it doesn't have an immediate result. It's an investment that you make, that it's a long-term vision. And by culture, I mean education in culture. And we are so programmed, I think, to look at the immediate results of what, a mathematics degree will do or engineering degree. But I think learning about art and about culture, and using these means to actually have a more in-depth perspective on life overall will actually lead to a much better society. And I urge anyone that has the power to make things happen to understand that unity in 50 years from now is directly linked to culture, to education in the arts, and to the things that actually speak about that. So for me, the Enescu Festival and the efforts that we make every year, the efforts that the Romanian government makes to make sure the festival exists, first of all, is really truly a culmination of what I hope will be an inspiration as well for us to seek to create more in the area of the arts, in the area of culture, so that we can have a more mature and truly profound society.
The event has grown tremendously in the past years, and I thank you and Christina for giving us the chance to experience these wonderful orchestras. I would now ask you for a personal reflection, because again, you have been exposed to different cultures and different musicians. And I also have in mind the concerts of the Ukrainian Freedom Orchestra. I would ask you, what moment in your career best illustrates the power of music to connect, to heal, or to defend the human spirit?
You know, the truth is, every moment that I spend making music, it's a moment where I feel elevated in my humanity. And it's a humbling moment, but it's also a moment that I celebrate. But I will give you an example from last night, which was a very, truly a special moment for me, because we created the first award of excellence given by the Enescu Festival. And the first recipient of this award is Anne-Sophie Mutter, who performed last night. Of course, Anne-Sophie Mutter is celebrating 50 years of artistic contributions to the whole planet. But in my 15 years of working with Anne-Sophie Mutter, what I also discovered is, for example, she's a person that for the past 25 years, almost anonymously to all people in Romania, she has supported and funded 2 girls' orphanages in Romania to help place them with families. And what she told me is that she came many, many times to Romania, basically, you know, undercover, so that she can make music with these girls. And I discovered this incredible humanity in what she does. And for me, discovering an artist that has given so much of themselves, not just to perform, but to also lift up the society wherever she sees it. She's a great mentor of young musicians. She's a great supporter of all kinds of initiatives and foundations. And, you know, for me, this moment last night, I really saw the way that someone that has so much visibility as an artist uses their power to actually create something even more beautiful in the society. So this was really, truly a defining moment for me and an example for me that I hope to follow.
Inspiring, and because you mentioned her award, we should mention your award with the National Orchestra of France for the recordings of George Enescu at Deutsche Grammophon. Congratulations, we really enjoyed them. And since we are getting close to the conversation, a short but meaningful conversation, I would ask you, if our world today, with all the challenges, tensions, but also the hopes that we have for a brighter future, were to be captured in a single piece of music, which composer or work would you choose, and why?
You know, I've been thinking so much about this idea of the immigrant experience. And of course, there are many, many different immigrant experiences, but I really do think that the world has both benefited and will continue to challenge itself by the immigrant experience. The immigrant composer is a unique composer because it's a composer like Enescu that has always had the perspective of looking back to your roots, but something happens the moment that you leave your birthplace. When you look back, you see beauty. And you see it with melancholy, and you see it with love, and this is what Enescu did. Which is why when he talks about Romania, he talks with all those things. And for me, as an immigrant myself, I wanted so much to come back to Romania and to both experience that beauty and love that I remembered, but also to find a way to help it achieve its potential. Somehow, the potential of a place is best seen from afar. And I think the composer, not necessarily a named composer, but an immigrant composer, if we go back in history, Brahms, he was an immigrant composer. And what he discovered where he immigrated was a completely different culture, that the friction that it created transformed his music. So did Beethoven, so did Enescu. And I think we need to celebrate the idea that we as Romanians are actually placed at the crossroads, both historically and geographically, at a crossroads that should be a meeting point rather than a friction point, where we celebrate the diversity that exists in a multicultural place. And when we find a way to celebrate this diversity by recognizing our identity, which is deeply rooted in this, and culture is what gives us that identity, then I think we can really have a profound movement in creating the society that we all aspire to have.
Indeed. And thank you so much for this conversation. I think we are getting to the end, unfortunately. And thank you for sharing these insights and for being with the Enescu Festival. We see the results and we see the quality of music, and looking forward to the concert tonight you are going to conduct. Today's conversation reminds us that culture and music are not only sources of beauty, but also instruments of resilience. You mentioned the immigrant composer. Instruments of trust, of connection between people, and the very foundations of the societies we want to defend and to nurture. Thank you so much.